You have your masterpiece finished and you're ready to share it with the world, but how do you get it out of Premiere Pro and onto YouTube or TikTok or whatever you're doing? I'm gonna show you how to do that incredibly quick. What up? I love you. We're gonna get into exporting your videos in Premiere Pro. To be able to efficiently export your video, you wanna make sure your sequence is set up properly first. One of the things you want to do is you want to select all of your footage and you want to choose the in and out point that you want to export. So you're going to drag all the way to the front of your video, you're going to click I, and you're going to go to the end of your footage, the last frame you want exported, and you're going to hit O. One thing to note with your out point is make sure, zoom all the way in and make sure it's not going a frame past where you want to go. One little tip is wherever your scrub line is, that's working on the frame in front of it. So you want to click one frame before the end of your video and hit O, and then you'll get your out point perfect. Otherwise your video is going to end with a little black frame. The next thing you want to make sure you have done is click save. Make sure your project's saved just in case anything goes wrong. Sometimes when you go to do anything in Premiere, it crashes. So constantly save, make sure auto save's on, but save before you export. To initiate the export, you're going to press Control M or Command M if you're on Mac, or go up to File, Export, and click Media. This is going to open a new window known as the Media window. Alternatively, in newer versions of Premiere Pro, on the top left corner, you'll see Import, Edit, and Export. If you click Export, it's going to take you directly to where we're at. There are a bunch of options that you can choose and select and move things around in Premiere when you're exporting. We don't need to touch most of them. The first thing we want to look at is we want to choose where your file is going to go and we want to name it. Choosing where your file is going to go is important so you actually know where your file goes. When I first started out, I would not choose where my file went half the time, and I would either have to re-export it or start the re-export and click on where it went. But we just changed that now. We save it. We have organization. We're better than that. We're gonna know where our files are going. You can click at the top where it says file name and change the name and then choose the location, but speed your stuff up 0.5 seconds. Click directly on location, choose where you wanna save it through the file navigator, and then at the very bottom, you're gonna see file name. You're gonna type your name there and hit OK. And now you've set your file location where it's going to export, as well as renamed what it should be all in one swoop. The next portion we're gonna go into are presets and codecs. Codecs are how files are compressed and decompressed. It's how computers read and move and compress, make smaller, make bigger, make accessible. We don't need anything complex here. We're gonna go with the very basic standard ones that work on most platforms. However, you can go more complex. There are things I am going to do in this that you may not wanna do once you know what you're doing. If you're looking at this video, that might not be the case yet. But as you grow, as you learn more, there are applications for all of this. Then we're gonna look at format. Format is very overwhelming. There are a lot of choices in here and you'll recognize some of them. You will have no idea what some of them mean. I don't know what they all mean, and it's okay because there's a very simple codec for here that is just gonna make your life easy and work with the majority of options. H.264 will work with the majority of applications. I recommend if you're just starting out, you're uploading to YouTube, you're creating videos for social media, just use H.264 and test it out. If it works, golden, you don't have to do any more research. If it doesn't work for your application, I would recommend to look up your application and see what codecs you need for that application. And this is the step that you'll implement that change to make it work for your use case scenario. For the majority of people, H.264, golden, don't look back. We're gonna look under the video tab now. If your sequence was originally set up how you want it, like we discussed a minute ago, under video tab, you're just gonna click match source and then you're gonna click advanced. If it's not set up how you want it, make the changes here and go back to your sequence, make the changes there, make sure your video looks good because when you change sequence size, things are shifted around. Some things may get cut off, other things may not be big enough. Go back, make all those changes, come back here, match source, easiest way to do it. Once we've matched source, we want to click the Advanced tab. The Advanced tab is going to give us a few checkboxes that we want to make sure are toggled on. The first checkbox is render at maximum depth. And this is basically allowing Premiere to override the root video you're using and render it at the maximum bitrate that we set later on. I would recommend you toggle this on. You may not notice a huge difference in your file depending on the size you're coming from, going to, what your bitrate set up, all that fun stuff. However, checking this on is not going to make the video worse. Render at maximum depth, make sure that's toggled on, and we'll move on to the next checkbox. The next thing we have is use max render quality. What this allows Premiere to do is it gives a better quality when scaling any of the footage. Again, depending on the use case, this might not make a difference for you, but having this checked on is going to make it a little longer of a process, but your quality will be better. If you have time and you're not crunched to export, toggle this on, export it out, see how it looks. It's a personal preference on if you want to utilize this. Next up, we have encoding. We're gonna leave the majority of the encoding tab alone. However, I would recommend that if you know your computer has the ability, turn on hardware encoding. It's gonna allow reliance on the processor as well as a little bit on the graphics card. So if you know you have a good processor and a good graphics card, go ahead, turn this on, and it's going to make it speed up and more reliable. We're gonna skip on down to bitrate next, which will control the quality and the size that your video comes out of. Essentially, this is the number of bits that are processed. Why did I air quote bits? Bits or bits? Essentially what bitrate is, it's the amount of bits that are processed over the given amount of time. So bitrate is important because the higher the bitrate, to an extent, the better quality you'll have. The lower the bitrate, the smaller file size you have because there's less bits in the file. The file's got less bits in it. So how do we choose what bitrate to set it at? First and foremost, we're gonna choose VBR 2-pass. That means there's gonna be 2 passes when it determines the bitrate, and it's gonna move it and try to maximize your bitrate while keeping the file size low in between 2 numbers that you set. If you're exporting 1080p footage, typically, we're gonna set this between 10 and 15. And that's all you have to do for bitrate. We're gonna move down to audio. Audio, I would recommend you leave it alone unless you know why you're changing it. If you don't know anything about audio, leave it at the defaults. It's worked out lovely for me. If your video has captions, you may be interested in checking out the captions tab. If it has captions, toggle on the captions bar, and then down below, you're gonna choose one of the options. If you want the captions on the video always, we're gonna select the option to burn in captions. If you just want the file that you can upload to YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're putting it, to allow the pre-made captions rather than the auto-generated captions, you're gonna select SRT file download. You can choose the option for both as well. You can also export the SRT file before you export the video through the captions window. There's a little drop-down toggle menu that allows you to export either to an SRT file or a text document. You'll notice there's an effects tab down below. Don't touch it. This panel is utilized in case you want to apply universal effects over the entire video before you export, but after you finish editing the video. Typically, most effects are done before. If you're bulk exporting and you're not taking the time to add everything individually, you can go through the effects panel here and apply it universal. But leave it alone. You're probably gonna wanna leave effects panel alone because you already have your effects on your video. Doesn't make a change if you do anything in here unless you apply something here, because then it's gonna apply universally to your video. Don't do that. Know what your video is gonna look like before you export unless you have a very specific use case. And in that case, tell me what it is because I'm curious. The very last tab we have in the export window in the middle bottom is General. General will give you 3 options. The first option is going to be import to project. Do you want the exported video to go back into your project so you can drag it on the timeline and edit with it again? If so, import it to project. It makes it easier. If not, leave it unchecked. Then we have use previews. If you have rendered on your timeline and not made changes afterwards, I would recommend you toggle on use preview. It's gonna make the export process quicker. If you haven't, leave it alone. You're exporting out whatever you're exporting. It's okay. And the last option in this is use proxies. If you don't know what this means, that's okay. There is a ton of videos about proxies on YouTube. I recommend you go watch one of those until we make our own. The quick version is when you have really large file sizes and you want to edit quickly and not have it kind of buffer as you scrub through your timeline, you utilize proxies. This is exporting with those proxies instead of the native footage. It will give you a much lower file size, but it will be worse quality because it is a lower file size. On the left-hand panel in newer Premiere, you'll see a few options that you can toggle on to export to different platforms. These options will be things such as YouTube and Vimeo, Twitter natively, I believe Facebook you can add into it, file transfer protocol, which is FTP. This allows you to export directly from Premiere and have it upload automatically to those other places and publish if you choose so. This is a great option if you know you're gonna publish it in minutes anyway, but there are limitations such as not being able to choose the thumbnail you're gonna add into a YouTube video. You can go edit that after, so it's not necessarily a limitation. It all just depends on the workflow you want. Now, the moment of truth. In the bottom right-hand corner, there are 2 buttons, Media Encoder, Send to Media Encoder, and Export. If everything's set properly, you can go ahead and hit the Export button. Congratulations, you've done it! However, before you hit Export, you may want to look at the file size. You can see this if you go up a little and left a little from that Export button. Your file size, again, is determined by how long your project is, what type of files you're using in your project, and your bitrate. If your file size is ginormous, you may want to look into, maybe turn that bitrate down a little bit. maybe not exporting at 4K for no reason, maybe just choosing different applications. If your file size is not ginormous, go make sure your bitrate's not set to 1. If all looks good and it's probably 300, 400, 500 megabytes, hit that export button. You're good. It's gonna take you a few minutes, depending on how fast your computer is. It could take you an hour. But once it's exported, view the video, watch the video. You know how many times we've exported and then not watched it and then implemented it somewhere and then it sucked. Learn from our mistakes. Watch your video in entirety. Sometimes there's just hiccups that happen. Sometimes frames are substituted by Premiere Pro and it will glitch out. Watch the video before you send it to a client, upload it to YouTube, or whatever you do. It takes however long your video is. You are now a master at exporting in Premiere Pro. If you're interested in doing this and then going immediately back into Premiere to edit other videos, you may want to look into Media Encoder. Media Encoder allows you to send your export to another program to export while you continue to use Premiere Pro. It's a great option if you're trying to turn and burn videos quickly. But that's it. You can export everything. I think you should go play around with export settings. I think you should try to learn as much as you can in this panel, because this will be the last frontier before your videos hit public eyes. So learn it. Learn as much as you can. Ask questions. Drop comments down. Join the Discord. Ask me personal questions directly. You can do that. You have the power. There is a link in the description where you can access me. I don't think I'm that great, but I made this video. So if you have a specific question about this video, you can actually ask me. It gets so hot in this room when I film.